So, Lionel Messi, a person who I think is undoubtedly the best footballer of all time, and if you disagree, I honestly question your judgment a little bit. I know that might not sound too correct, but I think it's just what it is. So yeah, so Messi, man. So this video is just to basically talk about my favorite player, the player who's inspired me the most, and just the person I think from a footballing perspective who's had the biggest impact on me in terms of how I play, how I see the game, what the standards are for being the absolute best in the world, right? He exemplifies this. So what I wanted to sort of do was just free form talk about Messi. We'll sort of go through his career from start to finish, look at the highs, look at the lows, and just talk about the best moments of his career, the most standout moments, his biggest moments, his deepest, worst moments, which really which hit us as fans as well really badly. So yeah, man, let's just go. Let's talk free form, right? Let's talk about Messi. So 2005, right? That's when you start hearing more about Messi. That's when he really starts coming into the limelight. He makes his debut in the 2005-2006 campaign, and the first thing you remember when he comes onto the pitch is his first goal, which was assisted by Ronaldinho, his mentor. And even the goal, such a beautiful goal, the lob over the keeper, which would become one of his trademark finishes going forward, right? And I remember even before he scored that goal, he had a very similar goal where he lobbed the keeper, which is disallowed for offside. So yeah, the first photo we get, the first iconic photo we get of Leo is Ronaldinho carrying him on his shoulders, for that celebration. So that was young Leo, that was Messi breaking through, and even at such a young age, you could just tell that something was wildly different about this person. And I think the most standout, the most obvious factor in his repertoire was his dribbling at that point in time. Dude, it was mesmerizing. I don't think there was a player in the world at that time, even 2006, 2007, who was on his level dribbling wise. And Ronaldinho is the closest comparison, but I think even back then, when he was asked about who he thought the best player in the world was, he pointed to a very young Lionel Messi. And I remember him mentioning this to Kobe Bryant in an interview, of all people. So yeah, so that's young Leo, right? So 2006, 2007, in the 6-7 season, the most standout moment is obviously the hat-trick in the Clasico, 3-3 against Madrid, the equalizer in the last minute, scoring from the edge of the box after, again, a Ronaldinho pass. The memories are so beautiful. There are so many beautiful, Clasico memories to look back on, and I think this is the first real major standout one. I think the season before this, it was in the same season, I think 6-7? Yeah, 6-7. 7-8 we lose to Madrid, but I think this is one really cool moment where he goes in between Roberto Carlos and Cannavaro, just cuts through them phenomenally. Mesmerizing moment. I remember seeing a video later on where Roberto Carlos goes, I injured my finger trying to catch him in that sequence of play. So yeah, Messi stars rising. He gets a Ballon d'Or podium finish, I think in 6-7 or 7-8. No, 7-8 he comes second. 6-7, I'm not sure. I think he comes third or second, one of the two. Anyway, doesn't matter. So 6-7, 7-8, they come in, and I think during this period of time, Leo used to continuously get injuries, and I think he used to have a lot of hamstring injuries. I think there are so many memories of him coming off, crying, breaking down. He also didn't take part in our 2006 Champions League final run past the quarterfinal stage. He was amazing against Chelsea, but due to injuries, he wasn't able to play further part in that tournament in our eventual win against Arsenal. So he was missing. So yeah, so up until 7-8, right? There's a player there who is just waiting to explode into a different stratosphere, but you also need the right environment to sort of facilitate that. And that brings us to the greatest coach in Barcelona history probably, and that is Mr. Pep Guardiola. So Guardiola takes over in 08-09, Mourinho is the favorite, but luckily for us we go with Pep. And I think one of the first major decisions Pep makes with respect to Messi is Messi wants to go play the Olympic Games for his country, and I think Barcelona as a club say no. And I think Pep sees Messi, not too happy sulking around a bit, in training, and then he, takes notice of this and actually allows him to go play in the Olympic Games and, obviously keep Messi happy. And I think that is basically the mantra for any manager going forward if he wants to be successful with a Messi in his team. It's very simple: keep Messi happy. So what does Pep do? Pep decides to build the entire team around Messi, not in midfield but more so up front. I think 08-09 is still absolutely Xavi Hernandez's team. Xavi runs the team. Messi is not as influential in the construction of play as of yet. So 08-09 comes, Pep decides, we can't have Ronaldinho being this kind of example for Messi anymore. We can't have Deco. He didn't want Eto'o to stay as well, but he decides to keep him on for another season, much to our benefit. So yeah, so no Ronaldinho. I think Henry also, when he was playing before this, he hadn't hit the heights he had hit at Arsenal. So there are questions around a few of the players in the front line. So Pep comes in, decides Messi is going to be the centerpiece of my attacking structure. And I think every Barcelona fan will remember the 08-09 campaign as probably the greatest club campaign in our history. We win the sextuple, we win the treble, the 2008-2009 Champions League final, Messi scoring that header. I remember all the discourse before that game being around the fact that Messi hadn't scored against an English club. And when people used to compare Messi and Ronaldo at this point in time, one of the things they would bring up was Messi obviously was not as good of a header of the ball as Ronaldo was, which obviously is not. Ronaldo is possibly one of the greatest headers of the ball in football history. But funnily enough, Messi scores a header in this game in the Champions League final against Manchester United off a phenomenal Xavi cross. So yeah, that's the first full campaign of Messi's in which he wins the Champions League. He still played a huge part in the 5-6 campaign, but 08-09 is Leo's first major, CL run. So then as his career changes, right, I think if I look at that 08-09 campaign, the game against Madrid, the second game, the famous 6-2 win at the Bernabeu, I think we've all heard the story of how Pep speaks to Messi the night before the game, decides that the biggest weakness in the Madrid team is the space in between the midfield and the defense lines. So he devises a plan where Messi basically drops into that position away from the central defense, what we later come to know as the false nine role. Messi basically pioneers it in this game. I'm sure the false nine role has existed in numerous iterations in the past, but I think in terms of the modern era, I think Messi really symbolizes that role to perfection, starting from this game on, where Eto'o goes onto the wing, and we repeat this in the CL final as well. 10 minutes after kickoff, right? Once we gain control of the game, once Eto'o scores, Eto'o goes over to the wing, tracks Evra all over the pitch, and Leo plays his false nine. I think, and United, all these United players, when you hear them in all these interviews talking about that game, about the PTSD they have from that game, one of the factors they mentioned was they're not able to track Messi as he drops in between the lines. So yeah, so next season, right? So next season comes by, and big change, we don't have Samuel Eto'o anymore. Pep decides that for whatever reason, Eto'o's not the centre forward for him. He brings in a certain Mr. Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who was undoubtedly at that point in time one of the world's best centre forwards. I mean, the things that Zlatan could do with the ball are mind-boggling. There is not a centre forward in the game currently today who has, even, I would say, 50% of his talent in terms of the acrobatic capacity that he has. Phenomenal player. Zlatan comes in, but for whatever reason, it doesn't really seem to work out with him at the centre forward position. I think even, when Zlatan goes, went off the ball later on this year, I remember in the 08-09, in the 9-10 season, Bojan actually comes in, and the team played, a much more fluid version of football. Now, obviously, Bojan isn't at the same level as an Ibra, but, they play better football. So I think Pep sees that, and from that point in time, I think Messi plays on the wing for that season for most part. Zlatan's the centre forward. But I think after that season, you really see Messi for a good 3-4 years permanently playing as the striker. And, that brings us to the 10, the 10-11, 11-12 and 12-13 campaigns, which have Messi as proper centre forward. And this brings us to the best goal-scoring version of Leo, right? If you look at 10-11, 11-12, 12-13, you see false line Leo at the absolute peak of his powers. We know what the 91 goal season is. That season goes down in history as the greatest individual campaign, 91 goals. And it's not just the goals. I mean, I think he had like 22 assists in that. So for someone who's able to also score the number of goals he does while also dropping as deep as he does to create play it is unbelievable. It's exceptional, man. So yeah, Leo, man, unbelievable. So I think as time progresses, right, we see there's a flaw in Barcelona's game where Messi is dropping in deep, but the only sort of way to break down opposition blocks is to have runners in behind. And I think after, around the time Pep leaves, we really start seeing a big decline in the quality of forwards that Messi has to play with. Villa gets injured, I think, and he's sold off to Atleti. He goes on to win a league title there, to his absolute credit. But Leo's partners start becoming the Christian Teos of the world. He's given him fucking 3 assists in a game, which is unbelievable, but it's still a Christian Teo. Pedro also sort of goes off the ball. So Messi's frontline partners really aren't up to the level. And I think objectively his worst season in Barcelona, it is still the best. I mean, he's still the best player in the world at this point in time, don't get me wrong. But I think 13-14 is when you see there are injury problems. He's still phenomenal, but he's not playing at prime Messi levels. So I think at that point in time, a lot of things change. And after 13-14, Barcelona bring in the best centre forward in the world in Luis Suarez. And luckily, due to man's biting tendencies, we got him at a relatively cheaper price. 75 million at that point in time is still definitely not cheap, but fucking absolutely worth it for a Luis Suarez. And that brings us to the formation of the greatest trident in footballing history. Yeah, so you think of all the great front threes, right? When we compare the MSN, Madrid's front three, Bayern's front three, we still come out on top. There is no front three in world football that I've seen that comes anywhere close to the MSN in terms of just overall ability. I mean, the level of football, man, just unbelievable. I remember, the 6-1 game against Celta where the famous penalty where Leo passes it on to Suarez to score. I mean, that game, I think if you just go and watch the highlights of that game, you see enough highlights in that game technically to last, an entire season's worth of highlights. It is one of the most mind-boggling games of football I've seen, just from the quality of play of an attacking front three. So yeah, we win that game 6-1. Just the sequences of play, man, it's unbelievable, right? So it's a shame that with that front three we only had one Champions League. I mean, the losses to Atleti, the losses to Juve. I mean, and that's sort of a sign of things to come, because after that Neymar leaves, 222 million to PSG. We all know how that goes, and that brings us to the worst, and that is the lead into the worst era of Barcelona, that the Bartomeu era. My God, dude, us winning the Champions League in 2015. I think we sold our soul for that one. That and the 6-1 comeback against PSG, we sold our souls for those two successes in order to go through the absolute nonsense that we had to go through after that. So yeah, so Neymar leaves and we decide to spend that money on Griezmann and Coutinho, and I don't really want to get into how those two panned out. Terrible signings, absolutely brought us to the point of bankruptcy. The opportunity cost of what we could have done with that money still pisses me off to this day, right? So long story short, our transfer policy, what we ideally should have been doing is surrounding Messi with runners up front to take advantage of all the things that he can do on the ball. But no, instead, Suarez becomes Messi's only go-to strike partner. And this is a Suarez who's aging, who's still world class, but this is a Suarez whose knees are absolutely short at this point in time. You can't really defend and press. And Leo at that point in time is also not going to defend and press as much. I think we all know how much he walks off the ball. So all of this leads to a drastic quality in decline with the team around Messi. Now Messi is still carrying the team on his back, goals and assists through the roof. The quality of individual plays is unbelievable. It's basically a carry job, right? And it brings us to that 2018-19 season, which I think from an individual perspective, from the perspective of a carry job, there is no larger carry job I have seen in club football. This man bought a dead and dying Barcelona team to within 2 games of a treble. If it wasn't for that collapse against Liverpool where, corner taken quickly and all that, if it wasn't for that game, this man is dragging a absolutely average Barcelona team to a treble, right? And it's during this period that we won 8 out of 11 league titles, and even that sort of stuff gets forgotten because the normalcy of Messi's greatness people take it for granted. The relentless consistency, you almost get so used to a point where you don't recognize just how unbelievable it is. So this is a point in time where all of Barcelona's Champions League failures really come to the fore, because as much as you can dominate in La Liga with the squad that you have, when you play the best teams in the Champions League in high pressure moments, our team used to crumble, and after the 18-19 campaign, once Ernesto Valverde leaves and once Quique Setien comes in, that brings us to the absolute worst Barcelona in history, is where we lose 8-2. I don't want to get into that period of time, and after all of that, the shit show that happens, and Leo is forced to leave Barca. We know about the Burofax incident. We know that even the season before he wanted to leave, the facts comes out, and I think we convince him to stay on. We force him, convince him. I don't know what happens there, but he stays on for another season, and then eventually, because of financial fair play rules, man's got to leave, man. It was heartbreaking. So that was the end of Leo's career at Barca, but there's a happier part to the story, right? And that is Leo's career with Argentina, and the way that sort of starts off. He's the heir to Maradona. He is the golden boy. All of this pressure is on him to essentially replicate what Maradona does. I mean, think of the pressure you have to hold from the age of 18, 19 to be the successor to your country's biggest footballing icon, possibly the world's biggest footballing icon in history. So he's had to grow up with that pressure. So he does great at the start with the youth teams. He wins the Olympics. He makes the Copa final in 2007. I remember this unbelievable chip he had against Mexico in that tournament as well. They lose to Brazil in the final, to a absolutely rampant Brazil powered by Adriano and Kaká. So, and that brings us to the 2010 World Cup, where he plays under Diego. He does great in the team, but Maradona, for whatever inconceivable reason, decides not to bring up Cambiaso and Zanetti from Inter's treble-winning teams. And he decides to stack the team with forwards, leaves the midfield absolutely open, which is fine against inferior teams, but once they come up against a really good Germany team, they get run through. I think they lose 4-0 in that game. And then, I think then Messi plays a bunch of Copa Americas where he's again dragging absolute mediocrity, right? Absolute just mediocrity as far as he can. I think they lose in the quarterfinals to Uruguay at some point in time. He makes, and then, oh my God, dude. I think when I look back at, the lead up to the 2014 World Cup, in qualification, Argentina play phenomenally. They have this really good counter-attacking system with Di Maria, Higuain and Messi being absolutely rampant. But 2014 World Cup comes in and Di Maria is injured. I think after the quarters on at least. Di Maria scores against Switzerland off that Messi assist. Messi's 2014 campaign, by the way, is absolutely phenomenal. It is again an absolute carry job. And without Di Maria up front, I think there is absolutely no one to carry the creative burden. It's only Messi in attack, right? So at that point in time, he still. What happened? I'll continue. And at that point in time, it's just Messi and 10 other people from an attacking perspective. I know that the team has a Mascherano in midfield and it's got a Lavezzi up. I mean, Mascherano in defense. No. He played in midfield. Oh, dude, Mascherano's tackle, his ass-tearing tackle against Netherlands against Robben. Yeah, that stands out. So anyway, Messi brings his team as far as he can to the final, where they lose in extra time to Germany. Mario Götze scores. I think we all remember that goal. Great goal. So. And that photo of Messi walking past the World Cup photo becomes iconic, right? He comes in second, but he does as much as he can, but it's not enough. And the next 3-4 years, they go really badly for him internationally, because 2015 Copa America final, lose to Chile, penalty shootout. 2016, same thing, Messi misses in the shootout. And at this point in time, Messi actually retires from the national team, right? Heartbreaking. And conversely, at that point in time, Ronaldo wins the 2016 Euro. So the narratives around that debate to Messi's perceived failings at international level, where Ronaldo's now got a trophy with Portugal, and Messi's retiring. So it seems like that narrative then sort of gets set in stone. And this is Messi's lowest point for Argentina, but he's convinced to come back by, the players in the team, the federation, and whatnot. And the turning point is, I think, the 2019 Copa America once Scaloni comes in. The 2018 World Cup, I don't think is as really notable to talk about. Messi again he's not performing at his best level, obviously. He plays pretty well. There's a great goal he scores against Nigeria off the ever Banega pass, the control and the right footed finish across the keeper. And he even has a goal and an assist against France when they get knocked out 4-3. Mbappe's France, right? The team that goes on to win the World Cup. So it's an Argentina that's clearly on the downfall. It looks like there's no real players to even support him. And Messi's quite old at this point in time. And I remember this line from the commentator when when Argentina loses against France 4-3. The commentator basically goes, right, this has to be his last World Cup. He's going to be 35 by the time Qatar in 2022 comes around. So it's just the last we've seen of Leo at the World Cup. Well, turns out, obviously not. So yeah, then Scaloni comes in, and what Scaloni does to revitalize his Argentina team, to get them playing the way that they do. Obviously the World Cup final against Spain is not an indicator of how well that team was built up during this period. They reject this European way of playing and they go back to this traditional Argentine way of playing, La Nuestra, with all the short passes and whatnot. And Scaloni starts building a team fully set around Messi. But what's different to these previous Argentina teams is when the rest of the team has to step up in their moments, they also do so. So Argentina win the Copa America final in Brazil, right? Against Brazil at the Maracanã. Messi gives this absolutely unbelievable speech before the game, goosebumps inducing, right? So they win that. They break that first barrier, right? They win that first major trophy with Argentina, and then they go on to win the Finalissima. They play Italy and they absolutely whitewash Italy at Wembley 3-0. And then we come to the 2022 World Cup, which was, in my opinion, one of the absolute best World Cups I've seen. It's not just the Argentina campaign, it was just everything around. The games were of such high quality, right? So 2022 World Cup, it starts off terribly with that 2-1 loss to Saudi Arabia. All the memes start coming up, where's Messi? And then we know how the rest of it goes, right? The goal against Mexico with about 30 odd minutes outside the box off a Di Maria pass Ochoa, World Cup keeping legend, by the way. Yeah, that sparks the Argentina revival, their comeback, and then the team starts to, they start to get Julian Alvarez in the team, they start to get Enzo Fernandez in the team, and the team slowly starts to get better and better. But now at this point in time, Argentina, I would say, are playing the best football in that World Cup. They draw 2-2 against Netherlands in an unbelievable game where Messi, I think, has one of the absolute best all-time assists through the legs of Ake to Molina. I will never forget that pass. I remember seeing it live, just going, what has he done, right? So yeah, we go through that game. They destroy Croatia in the semi-finals. I think Messi basically brings down Guardiola's market value by a good 20-30 million in that game, post that dribble. And then we know how the World Cup final goes. The greatest football game of all time, in my opinion, with Messi and Mbappe at the fore. That game deserves a whole other video on its own. I don't want to get into that, but that brings us to the promised land. Messi has finally won the World Cup, and that basically, I think, he was, without that World Cup, in my opinion and the opinion of a lot of other people, already undoubtedly the best of all time. But this really cements it. It gives him the accolade that he had wanted, since he was a child. And it was such a beautiful, cathartic moment, right? And you think at this point in time, okay, he can retire. What else does he have left to achieve? He's completed world football. No, he decides to stay on. He plays another Copa. He wins another Copa. And he decides to play the 2026 World Cup. And at this point in time, you're thinking, dude, he's 39. How good is he going to be? And this is also Messi, he's always going to be a player who's going to walk around. He's not going to contribute as much on the defensive side of things. But if you've been watching any of the MLS, like, I'm not going to claim to see full MLS matches, but just looking at Messi clips and Messi highlights from his time in the MLS, you could make out that the level was still as high as before, right? And what he showed in the 2026 World Cup is again the greatest carry job in World Cup history. It's his third one now. It's after 2014. It's after 2022. 2026 is the greatest carry job in World Cup history. He brings his team to the final. He scores 8 goals in the tournament. He has 4 assists. So many important, match-defining goals. The goal against Egypt, what he does against England in the last 5 minutes to turn around the game, come back 2-1. It's unbelievable, man. He had all of the English press on strings in the lead up to that game, where all of them were really confident of him, not being the old Messi. They were so confident that England would comfortably beat, this clearly weakened and not as good Argentina side. But yeah, they had Messi, man. What can I say? The final, I think we all know how that went. Terrible fucking game of football. I would not want to replay that at all. Ferran Torres scores the winner. As a Barca fan, obviously happy that Spain won. And that final, as a Barca fan, it was essentially a win-win. So yeah, man, that brings us to the end of Leo's career here, and doesn't bring us to the end of his career. I mean, he's still officially playing, and we don't know how long he's going to continue to play for. But yeah, man, what a amazing ride it's been. And if the last I see of him on the big stage is the 2026 World Cup, it's unbelievable that the last I see of him, he's still the best player in the world at 39, and I don't think we'd ever be able to say that about any footballer going forward. So yeah, that was it, man. That was a pretty long run through Leo's career with Barcelona and Argentina, and yeah, I hope you liked it.